Okay, guys, in this episode, we're going to be talking about 3 things to avoid if you want to get faster for hockey. Common problems we see in hockey players in particular are these. They are things that tend to limit people, and they're things which I see all the time, frustrating players because they seem to be doing these common mistakes over and over again. So I'm going to be talking about those 3, and then I'm going to be kind of flipping on its head at the end and talking about how we can make this much more effective for hockey players, and therefore 3 golden rules to follow if you do want to get faster for hockey. So if we start by looking at the main problem is that most hockey players don't have a simple set of guidelines to follow when it comes to getting quicker. So because of the amount of information available, it gets confusing. There's a lack of clarity, and ultimately it means you're not getting any results because you're just not getting any quicker. Getting quicker is actually quite a straightforward process. It doesn't make it easy, but the actual process to do it is relatively simple. And that's what I'm talking to you about in this video. So to begin with, the first one is don't avoid doing max effort sprinting. Something I see all the time is hockey players thinking that by doing sub-max running and by doing repeated 80%, 70% kind of running, that's going to really make the difference and make you a lot quicker. The simple fact of the matter is, in order to get quicker, you have got to be sprinting maximally. There's no way around that. And if you look at the majority of training for an elite sprinter, there's a lot of high quality sprint work, and there's not a lot of low level jogging happening. And what this means is you have really high quality outputs with plenty of recovery. And this is this polarized nature of training that sprinting needs to be. But what I tend to see is hockey players doing sub-max running or repeated sub-max conditioning kind of work, which inevitably doesn't really allow you to hit the kind of threshold we want, which is around 90 to 100% of your top speed. So we're not talking about 70 or 80% here. We're talking about top speed at absolute max intensity that you can sprint at. Because of that, you can't do a lot of this kind of training. So it doesn't need to be done every day. It doesn't need to be done at lots and lots of volume. Something as simple as twice a week for 20 minutes can be enough. And if you just hit, say, top speed above 90%, let's say 2 to 3 times in the week, that's probably enough during the season just to keep your body in a position where it's getting exposure to what it needs to maintain and hopefully get quicker. How much quicker you get depends on a few factors, including how long you've been training for, your age, all that kind of thing. But as a rule of thumb, everyone should be trying to hit top speed or above 90% twice a week. And the best way to do that is in your warm-ups, because you're already on the pitch, you've already got the time there, and rather than dilly-dallying around and wasting time, you can hit these sort of intensities and therefore get a really good sort of stimulus there to keep yourself pushing forwards and getting quicker. The reality is that hockey just doesn't give you the opportunity to achieve this, primarily because you're running with a stick, you're in a low flex position, you're running with fatigue, and you're also responding to external stimuli. So because of all of those factors, there's just no way really, unless you're running 50 meters down the pitch, full tilt in a counter attack or something like that, which happens rarely, it's unlikely you're going to be hitting those sorts of speeds. And a lot of the time when you look at GPS reporting, although you might hit high speed running of, say, above 5 meters per second, you're just not getting that much exposure to speeds above, depending on your speed, age, gender, that kind of thing. You're not getting a lot above 7, 8, maybe even 9 meters per second because of those factors I've just described. So the sport doesn't give you it. So you have to do the things your sport doesn't give you if you want to try and get yourself quicker. Otherwise, you just end up doing more of the same. And more of the same, as we know from training, does not mean you get better. You need to give the body a stimulus that it's unaccustomed to, not that it's accustomed to. So more of the same is not going to cut it. We have to do things differently. The second one is don't turn speed sessions into conditioning sessions. It's the same principle as I've mentioned, but rather than doing high quality speed work with large rest periods, what I tend to see is people doing sub-max running with short recovery periods. And that approach is fine if you want to get yourself more conditioned, and depending on the outcome you're trying to achieve here, whether that's improving your aerobic capacity, improving your repeat sprint ability, whatever it might be, they might have a place. But if you really truly want to get quicker, then you have to be doing high quality speed work, which means Max effort sprints, long recovery periods. And this to some might feel a little bit strange because you're not used to working like that. And it may not feel hard, but that's not really the point. Training doesn't need to be hard to be effective. So just consider, is my training hard or is my training effective? Is it giving me the result that I'm looking for? Now, ideally, you should be using a 1 to 15 to 20 work to rest ratio. In other words, sprint for 3 seconds, which for most players is around the ballpark of 20 meters, rest for 40 to 60 seconds before doing it again. Now, it might sound like a lot, and it is, but that's the whole point. You're trying to have a large rest period to ensure that you can hit 90 to 100% on every consecutive sprint. So as an example, this could be a flying 20-meter sprint. It could be a 20-meter acceleration, whatever that looks like for you. It might be a shuttle sprint. Depends what you're trying to achieve ultimately. But you need to have plenty of recovery in between that to maintain that type of intensity. Otherwise, one of two things will happen. You can reduce the rest period, reduce the ratio, which means that you'll have less rest, which means the intensity will drop, which means you won't hit the intensity you are desiring to achieve, which means you won't get quicker. Or you maintain the rest periods, you maintain the intensity, you do hit the stimulus necessary for increases in speed, and therefore you get quicker. And you've got to keep those rest periods long to ensure high quality work, as I've already said, because if you don't do that, the problem is that you're going to get a reduction in quality and a reduction in output. And the output is the thing that drives the adaptation to get yourself quicker. Now, one thing which people tend to say is, oh, that's actually pretty boring if I'm just sort of standing around for, say, a minute doing nothing. Well, fair enough, but that doesn't mean you can't do anything during that time. Some mobility work, some low-level stick skills. You can be creative with this stuff. It doesn't need to be just standing still doing nothing for 45 to 60 seconds. Some low-level work can be pretty effective use of time, but just try to not do too much that is going to make your rest period actually more like a work period. So if you're not really, it doesn't feel like rest, it probably isn't rest as a rule of thumb. So just trying to make sure you're using that rest period effectively. And the third one is don't forget to include technical running drills too, because this is the foundation upon which we can actually lay really high quality speed work. So sprinting maximally is great, but not if you're running like Bambi on ice, by which I mean, we might have seen people sprinting like this before, but inefficient running technique, mechanics all over the shop, no sort of control through the kinetic chain, no sort of postural control, all that kind of thing. So directionally, all the forces you're trying to put into the ground are going all over the shop and you're just completely inefficient. So we have to make sure we're doing good quality technical prep drills around our sprinting work as well, so that we're making ourselves more efficient and effective and our postures are better to begin with before we then go and do our sprint work. So to make sure that you're running effectively, we need to make sure that our postures, our positions, our patterns, to quote the Exos model, are really, really effective. So what we can do is, as some examples, in your warm-ups, make it a running session. So make it a running technical session and incorporate towards the end of that high-quality speed work. So if you've got 20 minutes before the pitch session, rather than just standing around or just, dribbling a ball around or maybe just using that time kind of ineffectively, why don't you use that to practice running technique drills and then do some high quality sprint work? You can do it with other people. It doesn't need to be just by yourself. If you've got other people turning up at the pitch before, you can do this simultaneously. You can do it with a couple of you. Even better if you're doing races when you're doing a sprint, because that's going to increase the intensity massively and makes it more likely you're going to hit those thresholds to get yourself quicker, and makes it more relevant to hockey because you're reacting to an external stimulus as well and trying to actually beat the person in a race. So that makes it more effective. So as an example, things like postural holds, things like A skips, things like straight leg runs, things like 3-point start, 2-point start accelerations, you name it. Depends what you're trying to work on. You're trying to improve your acceleration. You're trying to improve your change of direction. You're trying to improve your ability to hit top speed, so like 90 to 100% maximal sprint speed. That will dictate what kind of work you do. I've put a video out on this before around how you actually structure a speed session, but very simply, you want to have a movement prep sequence to prepare the joints and tissues for what's happening next. So mobility, prep, activation exercises. You want to include some kind of technical running drills, things like A skips, straight leg runs, postural holds, that type of thing. And then you also want to include some plyometric drills, so things like pogo jumps, bounds, skips, hops. So again, prepare for like ground contact times to make sure you're able to get off the ground really, really quickly. And then finally, max effort sprinting. And you can incorporate all of that very easily into a 15 to 20 minute session. This gives the foundation upon which max effort sprints can be built, because again, without this foundation of good quality movement, it doesn't really matter how powerful you are or how many kind of exposures to top speed running you achieve. An analogy for this would be something like a race car. Imagine a Formula One car where the chassis is broken, but they try to tune the engine up to get more power output. Well, it doesn't really matter how much power the engine can produce if the chassis is broken. So you just want to make sure that our foundations are in place, but so that we can increase the quality of our output. So if we flip this on its head, we get 3 golden rules to follow to get faster for hockey. Number 1, do sprint maximally every single week. Okay, so in your warm-ups, as an example, try and see if you can, and if you can time this, even better, but try and hit 90 to 100% of your max sprint speed every week in the warm-ups. You'll notice if you can accumulate that week upon week upon week, your body will get used to that type of exposure, will begin to get quicker. Do ensure you have enough rest period between the sprints, okay? Again, you can use the time between sprints to do some very low-level stuff like mobility and stick skills, but just make sure you are doing enough rest, at least 1 to 15 to 20 work-to-rest ratio, and then do include technical running drills in your sessions, again, to provide the foundation of good quality movement so that you can ensure that you're running really, really effectively when you are doing these drills.